Hey folks, my name is Girish, the host for Back to Basics, another Back to Basics for another week. Today we're gonna talk to a person. He's a former NFL, he's a yoga practicer. We'll get into all the stuff as to why that phase happened and what it takes to be a yoga person. So let's talk to Sean, and Sean will tell us all the details about it. So Sean, how are you? And thanks for coming to Back to Basics.
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here and speak with you.
Yeah. Thank you again. So before we get into the basics of who you are, what you are, and why yoga, what does back to basic mean to you?
Yeah, but back to basics means to me just keeping things as simple as possible in a world that's really complicated. Just my journey to becoming a yoga teacher was something that I made very complicated. You could say in terms of like my football journey, where I overtrained, and one of the reasons why I overtrained is, for me, I always thought the more I had, the more I trained, the more successful I would be. But over time, one of the big lessons I've learned is like it's life isn't about that having more. It's keeping things simple. So that would be what it would mean for me.
Yeah, Sean, thank you again for coming on the show and supporting me here. So let me ask you this. Is this a new trend that athletes are getting into yoga because they want to be fit, or they want to come to a different terms of life, or what is their thought process when they do that? Can you explain that a
Yeah.
little?
Yeah, this is an awesome question. Actually, this is like a really hot topic right now among a lot of athletes and also in the yoga, meditation, mindfulness world. So I think if you go back to the mid '90s, the Chicago Bulls, they started doing yoga. The coach at the time, who they nicknamed the Zen Master, he had them do yoga, or excuse me, meditation. But at the time, most of that meditation was just focused on like performance. How they could be more focused, how they could block out distractions. But now it's growing well beyond that, where the need, athletes are seeing that there's a need beyond using yoga, meditation, mindfulness in the performance, but also how do they deal with their day-to-day lives? How do they deal better with their relationships, their mental health? And so yeah, it's really exploding. You're seeing a lot more former athletes, once their career is over, either get involved with meditation, mindfulness just as a practitioner, and now there's more and more that are taking a similar path that I did about 20 years ago, which is also teaching mindfulness, yoga, or meditation.
Yeah. Thank you again. So, do you think, and I'm gonna get to your story also if you don't mind, but I want to ask this one question. Um, do you think that the world is getting too fast, that we need to focus on ourselves first? Or do you think that the athletes are getting into a competitive world and competing with others, and they want to make sure that they are grounded to be successful in their own field? Does that make sense?
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I would say it's a combination of both. The way most athletes are training now at a very young age, they are going into specialization. So up until maybe 20 years ago, it was much more common where athletes would play multiple sports, but now you have every sport now has these very, very competitive travel teams where you can play them year round, for thousands of dollars. And it's sports in some ways has become even more exclusive. And so what's happening is these athletes at young ages of 9, 10, 11, they're on these very competitive teams. They're they're overtraining. They're seeing overtraining injuries as young as like 12 now, repetitive use injuries. And so it's not just a physical, but it's also they're feeling the pressure at a much younger age. So instead of like, just playing their sport for fun and like in a recreational league, they're already playing in competitive leagues at young ages. And so this is starting to really get to their nervous systems at very young age. And so young ages, and you're seeing a lot of athletes now, by the time they're 18, 19, they are burnt out physically and or mentally, and and or emotionally as well.
Yeah. Thank you again. So basically, we're not saying only professional athletes. We're even talking, elementary, middle school, and high school folks too, right? And colleges, obviously.
Yeah, absolutely. It's starting at a really young age, so there could be, you could be 12 years old now and you could play baseball from January 1st
That's
to
right.
December 31st, which was unheard of years ago. But yeah, so they can be completely in it. And then you have the element now, of the parents, is this the kid's dream to be to get a college scholarship, or is it the parents? So there's that element of what as well.
Yeah. Thank you again, Sean, for explaining that, because I think this is a new world that we're living in. In your case, a new world for the last 20 years, because that I think has pivoted over. But I think it has been more on the light line lately. I'm not sure it's because of the crisis that we've been in for the last couple of years, or maybe we're just coming to a point that we just need to go back to basics and try to understand the psychoanalysis of that. So thank you again for Sean for explaining that. So
Sure.
let me ask you this: when did you start being a player, and which team did you play for? And let's talk about you, if that's okay with you.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I started playing sports at age 8, played soccer, basketball, baseball, all the different sports, but kicking footballs, it was what I was best at. So I eventually walked on to the University of Pittsburgh, where I had some success there, and then luckily because of my success there, I signed with the Detroit Lions, and then I bounced around the NFL. So I went from the Detroit Lions to the Indianapolis Colts to the New York Jets, and then I finished my career over in NFL Europe for Scotland. So my career wasn't anything like a Tom Brady for sure, but my career was more typical of what a lot of athletes go through, where they're just kind of bouncing around through the NFL, where they have a job one day and a couple months later they're asked to clear out their locker.
Yeah. So thank you again, because it's a tough world, and as I said earlier, I mean, it's more competitive when it comes to those type of fields. So thank you again for that. And then you had a little surgery, and some crisis happening there. Can you explain that? And then slowly you got into yoga right after that. So explain that if you don't mind.
Yeah, sure. My career ended prematurely, essentially because I I trained so hard. I would train for hours kicking the football when my body can only take so much. I probably should kick for 30-minute sessions, but I would have like these 2-hour marathon sessions where I just want to get better and better. So what happened was at the age of 25, my hip degenerated. So the muscle was essentially the hip flexor, excuse me, was essentially like gone, and that was just from overtraining. So just like many athletes, for me, like my career ended like not on my own terms. So I had a very difficult time like dealing with that. So I had the physical injuries, but also the whole like I guess you could say the crashing of my identity. Like now what? So quite often we see these athletes, they hang on, they hang on, they hang on. You can see them physically deteriorating, but they hang on because I think for similar reasons that I did, because I just didn't know what else was out there. Nothing else I thought could give me the joy or the passion that I had
Hmm.
playing football, because that's what I did for 17 years of my life.
Hmm.
So luckily for me, my wife was really into yoga. She was like a pioneer here in Pittsburgh. She was teaching yoga long before there was like yoga studios or anything. And so she got me into it. She tried to get me into it while I was playing football. She said it would help my back, but I didn't listen to her because at the time, football teams weren't doing yoga or meditation. That
That's
was
right.
just considered, not masculine, or, or what have you. So, but I felt like I had nothing to lose. So I started practicing yoga when I had when my career was over. And luckily within a handful of months, my back was much improved. And then also my mental and emotional state was much better. Instead of like looking back at my career with regret, it was doing all the yoga and the meditation and having some time to quiet my mind, which I think up to that point I never really did because I was always so goal focused. That's what really hooked me on yoga, because I become a teacher because not only what it did for my body but also for my mind, and that's what drove me to share that with other people and
Yeah,
to teach
yeah.
it.
Yeah, so thank you again for that, Sean, for explaining that, because that was a tough transition for you. So thank you again for explaining that. It was not easy to explain that in when you go personally going through that. So thank you again for that. Amazing Yoga and Point After. Now, I think those are the two books that we're going to talk about, and where these names come from. I mean, obviously, Amazing Yoga means amazing yoga. That's kind of obvious. But Point After, how did that happen?
Yeah, the point after came from the idea of the book is to show that there was more to life in the NFL, and that what I learned along the way. And so for me, I always thought like my life would be happy when I'm in the NFL and I got this long career and so forth. When I was playing in the NFL, it was my first year. Actually, I ran into a football player there, a fellow player. His name is Barry Sanders, who's now in the Hall of Fame. One night I came in after being out with the bars with the other rookies, doing what all the rookies do, and I was telling him about my concerns about being cut. And he said, "Hey, whatever you remember about your NFL journey is that there's more to life than the NFL." And I was only, I guess, 23 at this time, and so I didn't quite comprehend what he was trying to tell me, because for me, I didn't see that. But that's really where like the point after came in, because I only scored 1 point in the NFL, and it was the point after. So you score a touchdown, I go out there and I kick the point after, and so I kind of combined, you know, the message that this other player gave me that I didn't listen to at the time with my point after, and to show that, like, you know, the NFL is just really, there's so much more to that you know, and then the hope was in writing the book is that anyone who reads it, whether they're a football player or not, just, you know, we all struggle, I believe, at some time, like with our identity and our passion, would relate to the story.
Yeah, thank you again for you know, hopefully I'll grab that book and start understanding you know, the psychoanalysis as to how that process happened for you, and then how that name came up too. Was that a name actually came by accident, or do you think the book comes first? And I asked this question to most of the authors that I've talked to on the show. There are different answers and different processes for everybody. What was your process? Do you think the essay came first, or the book came first, or the title?
Oh wow, such a great question. But if my kids were around right now, they would be laughing at this, because I would throw different titles at them so often, and then they would, you know, make fun of the titles or so forth. But yeah, for the longest time, it wasn't even called The Point After; it was called something else. Yeah, I think looking back, I look at the initial title as just like a placeholder. But yeah, the more I wrote, then it then the title just kind of appeared, so to speak. Like, so it got changed multiple times. Actually, the subtitle got changed maybe just like a month before it had to be published. So yeah, you know, I've read different like best practices on this, and some say have the title first, and then that'll help guide you through. But then some say just write the book, and then the title will appear. So I don't know. I was kind of a combination of both.
Oh, okay. Thank you again. And I think that it sounded like more of a joke within your family as what the titles were. Do you have like the top 3 funny ones that you want to share as to what the titles should have been?
Yeah, well, I
Or
liked
could have been, I should say.
The one I wanted was like the kicker, because it was just like just plain, and I thought like I could do a play on the words and the kicker, but they're just like there's like, what is that about? And so no, there's actually more of the jokes were about like the book cover, because we would have all these different options for the book cover, and I would just keep texting them which one do you like, which one do you like, and then I would send them to the publisher, and then they would change it anyway. So it was just, this is something that went on for a month. The whole like process with working with the publisher was rather chaotic.
Yeah, so I'm, you know, the way you're explaining your story and what you have gone through and what the athletes are doing now for the yoga stuff, I think Point After is is the right title, I think. So thank God for that. So thank you again for that. So now, can we talk about yoga? I mean, yoga is more physical, or is it more mental, or is it more what? I mean, what is your answer to that?
Yeah, great question. The way we teach it is a physical practice, because we find for a lot of people here that's what draws them into it. But our hope is when we teach it, you know, is that you know, someone gets something more out of it than the physical.
Hmm.
And you know, my wife and I had similar backgrounds. She was a former dancer. I was a former football player. So for us, you know, we discovered that there was more than physical. So we just feel like if we share our experiences, maybe not like in a specific way, saying like, oh, you know, while we're teaching class, oh, why I play football, this happened, but more just about like the generalities of it. Um, our hope is that people can take more out of it. But we also look at it a way that everyone takes out of it something different and personal for them. Like for some people, maybe, you know, they just discover when they practice yoga, they become more patient. Some
Hmm.
people discover they become um, less reactive. And so we know that just a yoga practice itself, reminding people to breathe and focusing on the present moment, that everyone's going to experience something beyond a physical experience.
Yeah, yeah. So thank you again. So let me ask you this, and don't take it the wrong way, but when humans, they go through a rock bottom phase, and it happens to everybody. This is not just you. We tend to look for answers, like, for example, meditation, yoga, fitness. Making sure that we're thin, we eat properly, because we get cholesterol problems, BP problems, and whatever other problems that we can think of, right? Why do we have a tendency to think about these things when we go to the rock bottom? Why can't we do that day to day? What are your thoughts on that?
No, that's great. Well, it's funny to mention that because I was just talking to my wife about this the other day. Um, is that I think that there's not enough emphasis on practices such as yoga, meditation, mindfulness as more of a preventative versus, like you said, the other way around. And so, you know, that's how I've discovered that is the best way for me to look at my own personal meditation practice. Like if I just use it like, oh, I'm having a really rough day and my mind's all busy, I'm going to meditate. Sometimes that meditation doesn't go so well. But if I look at it more like as like a discipline, I'm going to like meditate every day to as something to help me cope with something that comes up later. I find that it just seems to be in a healthier space. But I think it's just looking at it a different way. Like I read somewhere that you know, 90% of visits to the to our doctors, to the physicians, is from stress, and but or comes from is rooted from stress. But you know, most of our working out is very physical,
Hmm.
and but we don't do very much, you know, to take care of the mind. So if 90% of disease comes from stress, you know, why are we, you know, maybe we're looking at this whole fitness thing and you know, upside down.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Thank you again, Sean. So at least my understanding is that we're both on the same page when it comes to mindfulness and making sure that stress is one big, huge killer to everybody, that we need to focus on ourselves and be mindful and be straight on that part. Am I right on that?
100%. Yep. Absolutely.
Yeah, yeah, Sean, thank you again. Now, one last question, if you don't mind. You have done a whole bunch of sports, and now you're doing yoga. Do you do you actually think that you're going to go back to sports again, or do you think that yoga is the way to go for the next 5 more years for your life?
Yeah, it's funny you ask that because I just my interest in sports has definitely declined. And I think it was because for so often, you know, for many years I was in the sports world, and I always thought it was just such an important thing. But now, I'm 50 now, and just looking at things, I just look at things much differently. That it's more about health, wellness, taking care of ourselves. And so for me, I'm just 100% into the yoga and meditation, and I do spend a lot of time. Um, Working with athletes and teaching them yoga and meditation, and I certainly try to help them physical because that's what they always want at first. Like, how does this help me not get injured as much playing my sport, or how does this help me focus more so I can, make more free throws if I'm a basketball player. So I'll help them with that, but I also try to, throw out some tools and skills that can help them like beyond that, because I know now that at their age, I felt like my career would never end. And a lot of them think the same way. They think they're going to be playing that sport until they're 30, 35, 40 years old, but it's going to end for them much sooner than later. So just helping them have some mindfulness skills that they can, they can use once their career ends in the future.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you again, Sean. And before you leave today, uh, how was your journey on Back to Basics, and how do you feel right now after this show has kind of slowly come to the end? And do you have any quick last words for all my listeners today?
Yeah, well, I feel inspired. You know, just speaking with you, and these questions are something that are just like so, I think so important. You know, for me, like it's so easy to just get all caught up in the rush of the day, just to like sit down with you today and just kind of pause and get some introspection here. This was fantastic. So yeah, I really appreciate the time that you allowed me here to speak with you.
Yeah, absolutely. Sean, thank you again for coming on the show and making this brighter and supporting me on next week's episode on Back to Basics.
Outside of getting a loan, I think I would have been better off 2 or 3 years better off.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of people that I know that they just paid off their student loan after 20 years. There has been people that they paid off in 3 years. There has been people who have been paid off in 10 years. So I think the reason why I say that and they're different ones, right, is because I guess spend more, live better and easier life.